Hey guys, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. Life from the perspective of a military family member is way different than a civilian standpoint. Military children and family members give up their hopes and dreams to be able to stand by and support their service member, and it isn't an easy lifestyle for anyone to live. I hope that this podcast is able to help connect the military community and give others just a glimpse into what the military life is like from the perspective of spouses and children. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. Today, I am here with Jen, who is a military child and spouse. So welcome to the podcast, Jen. How are you?
Yeah, Gracie, I'm happy. Or Grace, I see your name Gracie on here. Oh my gosh. I'm like,
Either
you're
one.
already gonna have to clean this up. Grace, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say kudos to you for being a military child, wanting to share our stories of the military child experience. So just thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So tell me kind of a little bit about your journey as a military child and what that was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'm very fortunate to be working with a nonprofit today who had a chance to learn more about my dad's story. And so even before my dad had joined the U.S. Navy, he was actually involved in the Philippine Army, I think in the 1980s or something, like forever ago. And then later on, he decided to enlist for the U.S. Navy. And that's how he was able to, take my mom and get stationed in Yokosuka, Japan, where I was born. My brother and I were born there in the late 1990s. And it was just a very interesting experience moving every 2 to 3 years. And we primarily moved back and forth from Japan to California. And there was a time where we did go to South Korea for a little bit. But, I got to say, like the first 10 years of my life in the military, it was very vibrant, loving. I really did feel a sense of community wherever I left or wherever I went and wherever I lived. And I think that unfortunately, fast forward to when I turned 10 and we had lost my dad. I often say that I lost my dad, but today I can also say, in addition to losing my dad, I lost a sense of community, a sense of family, because it's been really hard to recreate that camaraderie, just that shared common cause of, being of service to people. It's been hard to find that, I think since then. And so it's not a wonder that here I am 20 years later now involved in the military community and working with them directly with my husband, who is a veteran. I met him after his service. So yeah, that's a little snapshot for you.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think a lot of people do experience that loss of community, post-military life, at whatever age that comes at. My dad retired in 2014 and I was like 12 years old and I was so lost. Growing up, I lived more of the civilian life because he took a 7-year break in service from, when I was basically a year old to 8 years old. So I didn't have that military life growing up. So I basically had 4 years, and he was reserved. So we only moved once. And, but still, him retiring and us moving to more or less our permanent home, it's weird not being surrounded by the military.
Yeah. And I think that the military, no matter how long you've been in it or even how short, depending on how you're looking at it, it does leave a mark on you. It's a culture, it's a subculture in America. And it is a very interesting experience to be in the military bases to, getting catapulted into the civilian world. But either way, it's a very interesting community to be a part of, no matter how long you're in it.
Yeah, because everyone just understands, Yeah. You can say, hey, for example, we literally just met 5 minutes ago. And we're able to have a conversation because we both get it, from the aspect of, being a military child or, and connecting with spouses now because I'll be a military spouse one day. So it's like, you know, you can
Yes.
sit down and have those conversations and connect with someone because you have the one thing of military in common.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I just feel like there's this immediate generosity and trust and openness when you connect with anyone from the military, whether they are active duty or civilian. Like you said, they just kind of get it. And even if you didn't move around a lot, you know, you have to like one thing to understand is that the military, you know, when you're in the military, you're whoever is serving is essentially trained to kill, you know, to kill and to fight. And, you know, the average American isn't trained to do that, isn't trained to be a professional mercenary, essentially. And so, you know, even just that, you know, environment, that way of thinking and training, you know, it causes a ripple effect into the family, and that having that mindset, kind of always being ready, like always being prepared kind of thing, like having that mental state of like, you know, get ready to move, get ready to PCS, get ready to, you know, whatever. And really also knowing that wherever you're at is always temporary. And so you kind of learn to just, at least for me, I learned this like later in life, but I learned that it is important to be present, you know, despite how long you plan on being somewhere. In fact, it's important to be even more present when you know that your time at a certain location is only temporary.
Yeah, because you're going to miss out on so many different opportunities and experiences if you're kind of just in that mindset of, okay, I'm only going to be here for so long, so we're only going to unpack these boxes and we're only going to settle in so much before, you know, 6 months comes around and we're moving again, or, you know, 2 years goes by, whatever the case may be. You know, you have to be able to be present in you're living in a new culture. Like no matter if you're in a different country or in a different state, you're in a different culture of where you were last time. And, you know, it's such a special thing being able to experience everywhere, you know, in the military life.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the people you meet, you know, like you have people from almost every class system in America join the military. You know, some people join for economic reasons. Some people join for almost altruistic reasons to, you know, protect, you know, to fight for the greater good, to fight for fight for Americans and everything. And so you really get people from all walks of life, even if you never move or relocate. Like some people are fortunate to like stay in one place for a couple of decades. Like I've definitely met a couple of people like that. I'm like, wow, you're one of the rare lucky people who didn't have to uproot your life and start over and make, you know, but it is really interesting. All the people that you meet. And I do think it makes us better people for it, because we are people, what do you call it? We're people persons. Is that the phrase? Like, you know, like we're just like, we're naturally sociable, naturally like giving and open and trusting. And I feel fortunate so far that like my experience with the military community, like, because I think that there are some people who could take advantage of that openness and generosity and trust. But it seems like so far, my experience so far, it's like no one takes advantage of that. It's like they lean into it. And if anything, they're even more generous than me and want to give and want to help and want to support. And, you know, it's a beautiful thing. And it's partly why, you know, I actually got involved in the military community 20 years later, almost begrudgingly. Like, it's not like it wasn't a choice. Like it was a choice. Let me correct myself, but I wasn't really interested in it because, you know, I had a traumatic experience of losing my dad. And I was just like, well, why would I get involved in the military if knowing what it's done to my family? And the thing is that, you know, the military community just seems like one of the rare spaces where camaraderie is still very real. And, you know, just again, talking about those traits we mentioned, the generosity, the openness, the trust in the community, especially with like spouses and especially with spouses, I think it's incredible and it's inspiring. And it's always a good reminder that like, especially as a civilian now, it's a good reminder that like you can always start over and you know, the rug can get pulled from under you, but we have the grit to adapt and all that. We have that skill set. And I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, that's all.
Yeah. And I think, I definitely have a similar experience, and I want to ask you about your dad's situation, but, we went through a traumatic experience of my dad getting injured in Afghanistan. He stepped in an IED. And so, we have that experience. And I think, during that time from when he retired to when I started the podcast, there was definitely a longing to be back in part of that military community, but also this sense of, this was so traumatic. Like, this was such a traumatic experience. And, I don't necessarily want to be part of that. Like I said, I would never marry military because of that, because I've seen that side of it. But I mean, we all see how that went. It's like, you say things and they go the opposite way. But, you have that kind of resentment against the military lifestyle and the military in general of, you brought so much trauma into my life. Like, how do I, continue on, and how do I do that? But you find yourself back in the community again. And it's like, whoa, I missed out on this for so long.
Yeah. I think it's that familiarity, like for the fact that you also grew up in the military, and, there's a system in place. It's like, even if it felt so uncertain sometimes, like it was uncertain, it wasn't uncertain long enough before they told you where to go, what your orders are going to be, or where you're going to live and stuff like that. So it was really nice for that. And then also, just like you said, the camaraderie, the common cause that, the service members have, and that causes a ripple effect to the family. So, I mean, I think if you ask me like, oh, would I have gone back to the military community? Would I have come back if I didn't have to? And I think my answer probably would have been no, but I'm really glad that didn't pan out, because here I am. And, having worked with military retirees and, just hanging out with veterans and just hearing their stories and working with them, it's very like, I think it often leaves me with a sense of appreciation and desire to continue on that service-centric spirit, and giving back and thinking of the greater good and all that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think it's so important as well. But what was the situation with your dad like? Because you were so young. What do you remember from that time frame?
Yeah, it was a pretty wild time. So I was born in Yokosuka, Japan Naval Base, and that happened to be also my dad's last duty station before he was supposed to retire 20 years. So he was about 18 and a half years in when we moved back. And we had lived off base, as I think a lot of people do, for the first like 2 years, being on the waiting list before you get housing on base. And so then we lived on base, and it was really interesting. I really loved living on base because it just made it so much easier to hang out with my friends.
Right.
But I also enjoyed living off base too, actually. Like, I felt like Japan, at least where we lived, was extremely friendly and safe. And I mean, I was 8 years old. I think I was like 8 or 9 years old, cycling in Yokosuka, like in like the high traffic, like areas, like going under the tunnels. Like, I was cycling by myself. Like, I remember like, I was like, I'm going to go to the base today, and like, and I'm sure my parents were like kind of upset about it, but I don't remember that part. I remember the part where I was like just on my own little, 8, 9-year-old journey, cycling, from our apartment to going on base to pulling out my military card and like, yes, like I am a military connected person. Oh yeah. I felt so independent and just all of that. And I was like, oh, I'm bringing my bike in. And I think I remember like my dad or mom got off work and they're like, how did you get here? Because I don't think it was a short trip. Like I don't remember that's like how far we lived away from the base, but it was quite the adventure to just kind of, go through traffic and drive under tunnels and all that. and just feeling like absolutely safe. But anyway, it was around October 1998 when I believe there was two people that came to our house. And I know one of them was a chaplain. And I think the other one was probably the captain of the ship. I don't remember. I'd have to ask my mom. But I remember they came to our apartment when we were actually living on base in the towers. And my mom was like, oh, so sorry, let me backtrack. So my dad, his last ship was the USS Kitty Hawk, from what I remember. And his ship was taken off from like Japan to, I think, South Korea, when he had gone missing. And the story was that the two people who came to our home said that, they were sent, like, they weren't able to find him. Like they sent out a search crew in the ocean and continued an investigation for 3 months following to try to find him, and at the end of the day, in his death certificate, they had said that his death was unknown or that he may had drowned. I feel like there's a whole other backstory behind it. My dad did have a history of suicidal ideation. So we don't know if like maybe he had intended, like he had planned for that to happen. We don't know. But it really shook up the military base because my dad's story ended up on the news, like in the newspaper, like the base newspaper. I don't remember the name of the base newspaper. And we had a whole, service, like a funeral service without the body, obviously, like for him on the base's like church. Mm-hmm. And at that time, it was really, I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know how to process it. If anything, I was like, this sounds like really selfish, but I was actually happy because everyone on base knew and they read about it. A lot of my friends were coming to me and comforting me and supporting me. And I thought, wow, I have friends, you know what I mean? Like I have a community. But then, soon after the memorial service and, soon after like they confirmed, they declared that he is missing. That's when our life catapulted. We had to move and, we ended up moving back to California because we had a family there. And it was really the fact that like I had to move again, it's like, oh, okay, I got to start over again. Like I got to make new friends again. That is what broke me. I cried. Like I didn't cry up until that moment when I realized like, oh, okay, I gotta start over again, know? And so, moving to California, I remember that for the first 5-10 years following after, I was very passive about making friends. I kind of just let people gravitate to me and I was like, okay, we're friends, but I didn't take that initiative anymore. I think I was just like done. Like I was just done. But yeah, that's a little bit that is a part of the story. And even today, like we're very fortunate to be working with the Price of Freedom Foundation. So shout out to Dennis and Keith. They are a nonprofit that wants to document the story of our fallen heroes. And rather than talk about his death, they're writing a story about his life, what led, who he was up until the point when he unfortunately had disappeared. And I actually haven't read the book yet, Grace. The final manuscript is right around the corner from what I hear, but I'm really excited for this book to be available. And I'm really grateful to the Price of Freedom Foundation for doing it because I think it'll help fill in the gaps, it'll help like, it'll just help like add more to the story and hopefully I think at this point I have had a sense of closure and I have found self-healing through being back with the community, ironically. But like, I'm just looking forward to what it has to say. So right now I'm only telling you a lot of what I think I know, but I think the book is going to say a lot more.
That's so, special to be able to, and there's a good chance that it'll provide, even more of a sense of closure and just healing in that sense of, you're able to hold something in your hand and say, this is my dad's life, in words. And it's not just, thinking back to what you remember. It's like, the actual facts of what happened.
Yeah. I'm really excited about it because the organization has interviewed other family members and family friends. Unfortunately, a number of them I haven't talked to in a very long time. So it's just really great to have an organization who has kind of an unbiased, they have an unbiased approach to interviewing the family, because reality is, and it's interesting talking to other Gold Star family members around this nonprofit, or who have decided to work with this nonprofit, because they share similar issues where documenting the fallen hero story is quite sensitive, because when you lose someone, it causes this ripple effect in the family, friends, etc. And unfortunately, it causes a divide. Some people end up being estranged. Some people, everyone deals with death differently.
Right.
And so it's really commendable for them to want to be that third party to reach out to family members and people who knew someone such as my dad, and pull out that story. And hopefully in pulling out that story, it's not too much of a traumatic experience for the person they're interviewing,
Right.
I personally was just really happy to share my part of the story, my perspective. I mean, I was his daughter, but I don't know what it was like to be his wife, be his brother, be his, be his shipmate. So it'll be really cool to capture those stories. And I'm just looking forward to seeing how it turns out. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, that's really exciting. You've mentioned quite a few different ways that you've kind of integrated yourself back into the military community. What have you done, and what do you do to make that all possible?
Yeah. Well, let me start by blaming my husband. It's interesting because, my family, we joined the military for economic reasons. My dad, I come from a family of farmers. Both my parents come from a family of farmers in the Philippines, at different parts of the Philippines. Mm-hmm. And so I remember the story that I know is that my dad's dad said to my dad that you should join the Navy, so the U.S. Navy, so you can get more opportunities, and what have you. I don't know the exact conversation, but I think that's kind of how it went down. Even though my dad, from what I heard, my dad enjoyed being a farmer, but he was catapulted into this military life. And wait, hold up. I lost my train of thought. What was the question? I was going somewhere and I lost my train of thought.
How you integrated back into the military community.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And so, oh yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah. And so my dad joined for economic reasons, and, obviously it helped my mom, and, it gave my siblings and I an opportunity to be born and raised as Americans. And so, we're Filipino Americans specifically. And, it's been, and, having the military benefits, for us, our school has been paid for, and, we had TRICARE up until I think I was 23. And I remember when I found out I was going to lose my benefits, I was like, oh man, what am I going to do now? I can't go to the hospital anymore. I mean, I figured it out. I figured it out, and I'm really happy about how I figured it out. But at the time I was like, oh my gosh, this is the last piece of privilege or benefit I get from this is my last privilege as a military brat, before I have to grow up. I can't be a brat anymore. I have to be a civilian adult in my mid-20s, and I don't even know how to find dental insurance. It's great. Wow, here we go. But anyway, Dad came for economic reasons. And then, fast forward to 20 plus years, I meet my husband, and, he attended West Point, and he, part of why he joined the Army and became an Army officer is because he saw the greater good of the military at the time. I mean, he has a different opinion about it now, I'll be honest, but he mentioned at the time he wanted to serve. And so he did it more so for, that greater good. And I had never met someone in the military who chose to join because they wanted to be a true American patriot, even a lot of my family members and even my friends in college, the ones who were college dropouts, we had this culture of military is the last resort. If you don't do well in college, if you don't go to college, you join the military. So I had that and the economic thing in mind. So when I met my husband, who willingly joined and willingly went to West Point to want to learn all these things, I was quite intrigued. I was like, oh, never looked at it that way. And, funny enough, like I've recently like binge watched like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and like watched Captain America and all that. And I was like, oh, okay, I can see the, I'm not going to say propaganda, but I can see like the positive marketing people put out there to really attract people to want to join the military, and want to do it for the greater good. But again, our family didn't do it. So anyway, I met my husband well after he had already served. And part of why he transitioned, or not part of why he transitioned out, when he transitioned out, he was in Germany and he needed a way to stay there. So he joined a financial firm, and this financial firm in Germany happened to be focused specifically on American service members, or, US service members. And so he was able to find a niche in the financial space, working with military retirees specifically. And then his mentor, like he wanted to leave Germany. So his mentor was like, oh, come to San Diego. And he moved to San Diego, and that's how we met. And, fast forward, I think 2-3 years, we moved over here to the East Coast. I'm currently in Hampton Roads in Virginia. And, part of this journey of having been out here in the East Coast for the last 4 years, which has been a culture shock to say the least, it's been a major culture shock, like 4 seasons in my adult life. How do people get to work? I can't, like when it snows, it's wild. But part of the journey wasn't just the culture shock of experiencing the 4 seasons again, but it was more about like figuring out how do I work with my husband, because I'm working in a financial firm primarily with veterans who are, bros, and they served in the military as single people, unmarried, no kids. And yet here we are trying to offer financial services to our military retirees, particularly our military families. And so part of like what I realized in our team is that I'm the only one who had a military family experience. Like I grew up in a military household. And one thing we noticed in working with our career military families is that, when it comes to decision time, when it comes to the financial decisions, it's not the service member that makes the final decision. It's the spouse. Okay. And the spouse runs the house, y'all. I said that the first time. I love how that rhymed. The spouse runs the house. Okay. Remember that, y'all. But anyway, like, they are the ones who make the final decision. And what I had noticed working with my husband, Scott, and our team is that they primarily had focused on talking to the service member, but there was sort of this disconnect in talking to the spouse. So come decision time, a lot of times we had found that even if the service member is ready to move forward with whatever they chose to do financially, the spouse was like, hold up, stop. Like, what are you doing? It was like one of those situations. And there was, like I said, there was this disconnect. So it made me really curious to know, like, where's that disconnect coming from? And so I wanted to study the military community. And so we talked about this with the team, and long story short, we started a podcast in 2019, summer 2019. We have a podcast show called Holding Down the Fort. And it's really been my way of reconnecting with the community, at least for what it is today, and hear their stories and really find that answer as to like, why is it so hard for, let's say, military spouses, like seasoned spouses specifically, who've been in this life for so long, to make long-term financial planning decisions. Like spouses are really easy. Most spouses, or a lot of spouses in my experience, are really good at the day-to-day budgeting or the monthly budgeting. Like they're really good at tracking all that stuff. But when it comes to like insurance or leaving a legacy, growing their wealth, it's very over their head. I'm saying this in the most respectful way possible. And I was very curious about that. I was like, where is that coming from? Well, if you're a military spouse, all you could do is live day to day, because every day is crazy. Yeah. So I'm really grateful to have really gotten back in touch with what it meant to be a military child and reconnect with the family side of the military. And, in that process of interviewing them, I learned so much about myself in the process, and just the gratitude I have growing up in a military household. I think that we have so much grit and tenacity and creativity and resourcefulness that I believe that a lot of our civilian counterparts don't necessarily have. Now, I also think that, the downside of that is, and I'm just speaking on my own personal flaws, is that sometimes we have committal issues because we're like, well, I'm just going to leave anyway. Like, even if you're already transitioned out, like your mindset's like, okay, what's my plan B? What's my escape route? But yeah, that's what brought me back is my husband. I blame him and, and I also thank him. And it's really been a very transformative experience. And I didn't realize the value of sharing my story until getting back involved. I didn't think my story mattered, honestly, because I was like, well, I was a military child for like the first 10 years. I don't remember any of it. I mean, I did, I journaled, but still, I really minimized my experience. And now hearing you, Grace, and how, you and your family transitioned when you were 12, it actually kind of affirms my journey. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm not the only one who got like transitioned out with the family at a pretty young age. That seems to be like, I'm not the only one. And I love how you are validating the stories of military children, no matter how long they were in it and how young they were when they're in it. Cause it's it really shapes you. The military life shapes you, especially if you're born into it.
Yeah. Cause you don't have that choice. You're kind of just in it to go. You're in it to win it. Yes. Yeah. So the last thing I always like to ask is, what piece of advice would you give to another military child, or since you're kind of involved with the spouses too, what would you say to a child or a spouse?
Wow. That's a wow. I haven't thought about this. I think what I just want to say, and this is going to be kind of me channeling my inner child and talking to her directly. I want to say that, like, your journey is valid. Your journey is special and unique. And it's valid and it's unique and it's beautiful, and you're not alone in it. And the things that you're learning on your journey is going to help you for the rest of your life, the way that you connect with people, the way that you pursue your whatever careers you decide. And I just want you to know that even in the craziness of military life, like, you're not forgotten. I think I very much felt that a lot of times, especially when we had transitioned out. It's like, you are serving just as much as, the service member is, as the spouse is. And I just want to say that it's a very unique privilege to be a military child. To the spouse, and this is me kind of speaking to my mom, just thank you for just everything, and the life you lived, and trying to keep it together for us, and shameless plug, holding down the fort, for our family. And I'm just forever in debt to, like, your sacrifice, and I'm just forever into debt. And my mom's my biggest hero, as corny as that sounds and weird to say out loud, but there it is. Now it's recorded. And and spouses, man, they are the cornerstone of military families and our military community. And I just want to say to them, thank you. Thank you. I see you. I value you. I respect you. And thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing all of what you did share.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Grace.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Grace of a Military Child and Life. Make sure to set a reminder for every Tuesday to listen to a new episode. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Grace of a Military Child and Life. If you have any questions or want to be on the podcast, send a message to one of our social media platforms or email grace.of.a.military.child@gmail.com. See you next week.